Rosa's response was typical of her generation of soldiers, focused on the mission rather than personal recognition. We got everyone home. That's what matters. But maybe next time we can have this conversation before people get hurt, instead of after. The after-action review was conducted 3 days later with the full attention of Theatre Command. Rosa's performance had turned a potential disaster into a successful mission. But more importantly, it had exposed dangerous flaws in how intelligence was being analyzed and missions were being planned. Lieutenant Colonel Brooks, to his credit, took full responsibility for the failures in planning and execution, but he also made sure that Rosa's contributions were properly recognized. Chief Warrant Officer Martinez didn't just save lives through her actions in combat, he told the review board. She showed us that experience and institutional knowledge are force multipliers that we ignore at our own peril. Her understanding of local tactics, cultural factors, and terrain analysis turned a failed mission into a successful one. Rosa was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for her actions that day, but the real change was in how special operations teams began approaching mission planning. Cultural intelligence officers like Rosa were no longer relegated to translation duties. They became integral parts of tactical planning from the beginning. At her retirement ceremony 6 months later, Rosa was surrounded by the soldiers whose lives she'd saved and the younger officers who had learned to value experience over assumptions. In her final speech to the unit, she addressed the lesson that day had taught everyone. There's a temptation in military culture to value youth and aggression over experience and caution, she said. Both have their place, but wisdom comes from knowing when each is appropriate. The enemy doesn't care about our career timelines or our assumptions about their capabilities. They care about results, and they respect only competence. She looked out at the audience of young operators who now sought her counsel rather than dismissing her presence. Every soldier in this room has something valuable to contribute, regardless of age, gender, or background. The key is creating an environment where those contributions can be heard before they're desperately needed. Don't wait until everything goes wrong to discover that the person you've been ignoring might be the person who can save your life. Rosa Martinez retired with 30 years of service, but her legacy lived on in the countless soldiers who learned to look beyond surface appearances to find the strength and wisdom that experience provides. Sometimes the most important warrior in the room is the one everyone overlooks until it's almost too late to notice. Stay out of the way, Martinez. We don't have time to babysit you during this operation. Lieutenant Colonel Brooks's harsh dismissal cuts through the pre-mission briefing as 55-year-old. Chief Warrant Officer Rosa Martinez quietly reviews intelligence reports in the corner of the Tactical Operations Center. Around the table, younger officers ignore her decades of special operations experience, treating her like excess baggage on what everyone believes will be a straightforward extraction mission. None of them realize that when everything goes wrong, this overlooked veteran will become their only chance of making it home alive. What happens next will prove that experience and wisdom can triumph when youth and arrogance fail. If you believe that every warrior deserves recognition for their contributions, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments. Have you ever been sidelined only to become the person everyone needed most? This mission will show why you should never count out a seasoned fighter. Rosa Martinez had been through this routine 100 times before, but today felt different. At 55, with 28 years of military service behind her, she was supposed to be winding down toward retirement. Instead, she found herself attached to a joint task force operation in Syria. Her expertise in Middle Eastern languages and cultural intelligence making her technically valuable, but practically ignored. The mission briefing was being conducted by Lieutenant Colonel Brooks, a fast-track officer, 15 years her junior, who had never served in the region before this deployment. Around the table sat his hand-picked team of young, aggressive special operations personnel who saw Rosa as deadweight, an older female warrant officer taking up space that could have gone to another shooter. The target was a compound outside Aleppo, where 3 American contractors were being held by a militia group. Intelligence suggested minimal resistance, a quick in-and-out operation that would make everyone's career look good. Rosa had read the same intelligence reports, and something about them bothered her. but nobody had asked for her opinion. Lieutenant Colonel Brooks addressed the room with the confidence of someone who had never seen a mission go sideways. "This is a straightforward extraction. We go in fast, grab our people and get out before anyone knows we were there." "Questions?" Rosa raised her hand slightly. "Sir, I've reviewed the cultural intelligence on this militia group, and there are some factors that might complicate a direct assault approach." Brooks barely glanced at her. "Martinez, we've got this covered. Your job is to handle any translation needs if they arise. Leave the tactical planning to the operators." The dismissal stung, but Rosa had learned to pick her battles. She'd served in Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia, and half a dozen other hotspots where her language skills and cultural knowledge had saved lives. But to this new generation of operators, she was just an old lady trying to stay relevant. Master Sergeant Collins, Brooks's senior NCO, leaned back in his chair. "Ma'am, no disrespect, but we've done dozens of these extractions. Sometimes the simple approach is the best approach." Rosa nodded quietly, but made mental notes of everything she was hearing. The compound layout, the proposed entry routes, the extraction timeline, all of it based on intelligence that felt incomplete to her experienced eye. The team moved out at 200 hours. Rosa found herself assigned to the Overwatch position with the communications team, far from the actual action. As they flew toward the target in two Blackhawks, she listened to the pre-assault chatter and felt increasingly uneasy. The young operators were treating this like a training exercise, joking about who would get to the hostages first. Lieutenant Colonel Brooks was already planning his after-action report. Nobody was discussing contingencies or backup plans because nobody expected to need them. Rosa tried one more time. "Sir, the militia leader we're dealing with has a history of setting traps for Western forces. Maybe we should consider a more cautious approach." Brooks' response came through the headset for everyone to hear. "Martinez, stay in your lane. We've got real-time intelligence that shows minimal security. This isn't Iraq 2004. These aren't sophisticated enemies." The insertion went perfectly. Both helicopters landed at the planned coordinates. The assault teams moved toward the compound with textbook precision, and initial reports suggested the intelligence was accurate. Light security, confused guards, no sign of prepared defenses. Rosa monitored communications from the Overwatch position, but something in her gut told her this was going too smoothly. That's when everything fell apart. The compound turned out to be a carefully prepared trap. What looked like 3 hostages were actually militia fighters wearing American uniforms. The real hostages were in a separate building 2 kilometers away, and the entire area was filled with hidden fighting positions and improvised explosive devices. Brooks' voice over the radio went from confident to panicked in seconds. "We've got multiple casualties. This is a trap. Request immediate extraction." But extraction wasn't possible. Both landing zones were now under heavy fire, and the helicopters had to pull back to avoid being shot down. The assault team was pinned down in a compound that had been specifically designed to be a kill zone. Master Sergeant Collins' voice came next, shaky with fear and pain. "We've got 5 wounded, including the colonel. We can't move and we can't stay here. Someone needs to figure out how to get us out of this." From her Overwatch position, Rosa could see the entire tactical situation unfolding. The compound was surrounded by militia fighters who had been waiting for exactly this scenario. The assault team was trapped in a building with limited ammunition and no clear escape route. That's when Rosa made her decision. She grabbed her rifle and started moving toward the compound, leaving the communications team despite their protests. As she moved through the terrain, her years of experience in the region kicked in. She knew how these militia groups thought, how they positioned their forces, and most importantly, how they could be outmaneuvered by someone who understood their tactics. "Martinez, what are you doing?" Brooks's voice crackled over the radio. "Get back to your position." "Sir, I'm going to get you out of there," Rosa replied calmly. "But I need you to listen to me now. Your assault plan assumed these were amateurs. They're not. This is a professional ambush, and we need to respond professionally." Using her knowledge of local tactics and terrain, Rosa began picking off militia fighters from positions they hadn't expected to be threatened from. Her movement was careful and calculated. Each shot planned to create maximum confusion among enemies who thought they controlled the entire battle space. More importantly, she used her cultural knowledge to predict how the militia would react. When she eliminated their overwatch positions, she knew they would consolidate around the compound. When she began targeting their communications equipment, she knew they would become confused and start making mistakes. Rosa's voice over the radio became the calm center of the chaos. "Colonel, I need you to move your wounded to the north side of the building. There's a drainage culvert that leads to a wadi about 50 meters away." "How do you know about the culvert?" Collins asked. "Because I actually read the terrain analysis instead of just the tactical summary," Rosa replied while engaging another militia position. "And because I've been doing this since before some of you were born." Over the next 2 hours, Rosa single-handedly turned the tactical situation around. Using a combination of precision shooting, tactical knowledge, and cultural understanding, she eliminated key militia positions, disrupted their communications, and created escape routes that the original assault plan had never identified. But her most important contribution wasn't military, it was psychological. Her calm voice over the radio, providing clear instructions and steady leadership, kept the pinned-down assault team from panicking. Rosa guided them through a complex extraction movement that involved using terrain features she'd identified during her pre-mission study. Features that hadn't been included in the tactical briefing because they'd been deemed irrelevant by officers who had never operated in this specific environment. When the helicopters finally returned to extract both teams, Rosa was the last person to board. As she climbed into the aircraft, she was covered in dust and cordite, her equipment showing signs of hours of combat. But her expression was as calm as it had been during the initial briefing. Lieutenant Colonel Brooks, now bandaged and clearly shaken, looked at her with something approaching awe. "Martinez, how did you know? How did you see what we all missed?" Rosa secured her weapon and sat down for the flight back to base. "Sir, I didn't see anything you couldn't have seen. I just took the time to look at the complete picture, instead of focusing only on the parts that supported what I wanted to believe." Master Sergeant Collins, his arm in a sling from shrapnel wounds, shook his head. "Ma'am, you saved our lives out there, all of us. We should have listened to you from the beginning."